Welcome to the Now Moment Journey podcast, and I'm your host, Kirsten Lovett. And I wanted to introduce this episode as it is a little bit different from other episodes. It is a excerpt from a book project that I'm working on, and I'm doing chapters in video format first, and then I'm going to put them together into a book. And I just wanted to let you know that the following episode will be available at http:// nowmomentjourney.substack.com. And also, if you like this material and you want to get more in touch with techniques on how to become an animistic ritualist or practice shamanic techniques or learn Nordic ritualism, Germanic ritualism, I encourage you to check out www.patreon.com/shamanic earth medicine, where myself and my sister Marissa Lovett are co-creators over at that Patreon since 2019. So enjoy the episode, and I would love to hear your thoughts. Come on over to the Substack if you want. It's free over there. You can also join the Patreon for free too. So check it out and let me know what you think. Okay, enjoy. So I want to tell you about some of my personal experiences and also talk about some concepts. But first, it may take me a few minutes to kind of get into this, but basically my perception has always been kind of different from what we get taught in books and society. I mean, I guess I would fall into the category of somebody who's psychic, but I think the there's differences between different kinds of psychic abilities, and a lot of people do different things with their abilities. I mean, there's no one way to do things. So that's just a little bit. I'll tell you more about that later. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about like the word ancestor, and as it relates to other kinds of consciousnesses like plants or animals or stones, or some people work with deities or with, nature spirits that are outside of that realm of plants, animals, and stones. Sometimes they're different kinds of beings, but I want to get back to like 3D reality. Like, for example, we all walk around, we do our jobs, and we go home and we have our lives. And I think the thing that's been really great about finding out about these different consciousnesses is that while you're in your 3D life, which is your physical life, you're working and you're resting and you're having fun, hopefully, and you're, having, meaningful relationships, or you're working on projects that make you happy or whatever. That's not all there is. I think especially people who are creative people kind of understand or feel this intuitively, that there's more levels of consciousness that are out there. And I think, sometimes it happens to people differently. Like some people, it just happens to them, where they just kind of have to go through this difficult process to kind of like figure out why things are happening to them. And they have to find, I guess, what you would call unorthodox or non-mainstream ways of healing, and then that leads them into a different kind of experience of life in general, like a transformation, like a real transformation, where they become kind of a different person in terms of like how they see the world. And so that happens, I think, a lot to different people, but it happens in different ways. and all the different ways that it happens are completely valid. And but amongst those different kinds of ways, there's probably a lot of things that could make it easier, um, because we don't have the means in our culture right now. uh, when I say our culture, I mean Western culture doesn't really have a structure in place for people who have altered states of consciousness happen to them, like before they know how to deal with them, or maybe they have like some kind of foreign energy that they don't know how to deal with. Um, this is very hard for me to talk about, so I'm going to do my best to talk about it. But I think as a child, I was around a lot of, you know, let's just call it light and dark instead of positive and negative. I was around obviously some light energy, but I was also around a lot of consistent dark energy. So, or heavy, I should say heavy, light and heavy, because that's how the Andeans, Andean, how they categorize it. And that makes more sense really when you think about it, because once you feel what that means. So being around that much dark energy, and it kind of came and go, it kind of came and went, where there's maybe periods of my life where it was a little more, intense, and then maybe it tapered off for a bit, and then it came back again. And then usually it was, I mean, it could have been a number of different factors, and maybe I'll go into that later. But it tended to be around ancestors, and even when people died, um, there was still problems, And now there's, like I said in the other YouTube, or in the other video I did, there are people such as my sister who deal with actual ancestral healing specifically. So what I'm talking about now is going to get into like kind of going around it and addressing it from kind of a different perspective, like not directly, but maybe it's more indirect. That's probably a better way of putting it, indirect. And I'll tell you why. Because of my association with the word ancestral healing, or not healing, but ancestors in general, because I had always felt the unresolved and unhealed energies of ancestors, um, unhappy energy. I just didn't want to have anything to do with it, for a long time. That's changed recently. I over the last few years, I've definitely made some progress in that area. So it can improve always. But I think I'm trying to go back further so that I can address people who maybe when they hear that word, they're like, I don't want to deal with that. Well, I was the same way. And so, but I was also in a situation where, and the situation comes and goes. It's thankfully not as bad as it used to be, but I still have to deal with it occasionally, which is, foreign energy happens. Heavy energy happens. Sometimes it's just random, Sometimes I could be in a public place somewhere, and, it'll just happen to be there. And I come home and I realize I just feel kind of strange, and I have to do some practices to clear my energy field. Sometimes it's something that maybe takes a little longer than that and might require 2 or 3 different kinds of things. And that's just about my physical body. Sometimes there's patterns that I have to deal with. But, I was, like I said, I was reluctant to deal with this, like maybe direct one-on-one or head-on, like, okay, I want to deal with my ancestors now. So one of the first things I sought out, besides like, they kind of happened at the same time. It was a combination of stones and smoke, like tobacco and certain kinds of incense, things like that. Because at the time, I was constantly feeling like I had foreign energy on me. Obviously, it was invisible. So you know, only I could see it or feel. It was really something where I could feel it. Sometimes I could hear it. But smoke was really, and not really cigarette smoke at the time, even though I was a commercial smoker at the time, like a heavy one. But I was really into like, we had access to Palo Santo at that time, and we had access to sage, and sage was really good. Right behind me, you'll see a little dream catcher, and then there's a little bit of sage in that in the center pouch. And this was something that I feel like was kind of like directed towards me. I did seek it out. I went to like I'm bringing this up because I think this is a good example. I went to one of these, it was like an art show, like a gift artisan show of Native American crafts and things like that. And it was local, but it was a guy who, I think he was originally from the plains of North America, but he told me, he said, I was looking around, you know, in his area, the wall where he had like, I don't know, must have had like 50 of these different kinds, all different kinds, different sizes, different animal spirits, different, you know, makeup and everything like that. And he knew I was like looking at different ones, and he said, "You want the one with the sage?" And I hadn't said anything to him. I just said hello, you know. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. He like knew that. And so I went over to this one, and I picked it up, and when he was wrapping it up for me, he said, "You know, I made this one here in Florida." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I said, "You know, are you not originally from here?" He says, "Well, no, I'm originally from, you know, out west of Shoshone." And he says, "But, you know, I travel, and sometimes I make these in certain states wherever I'm, you know, traveling." He says, "I made this one in Florida." So, which is where I live. So I thought, you know, this is cool. And this one has stuck with me for a long time, since 2007. It's a long time. And so sage is continues to be a special plant spirit. And in another video, I'll talk about the, you know, controversy around that. But just the feeling of being able to, I think there's different terms for it. Obviously, smudge is not, that's been appropriated, which, you know, whatever verb you use to sweep your energy fields with smoke, that sweep is a nice non-loaded verb that basically tells you exactly what you're doing. You're taking something with incense, which has its own plant spirit, sweeping it down, you know. And usually when you see people doing that, you'll either see them cleansing and purifying in some kind of, you know, real sweeping motion up or down or out, something like that. And then you'll see, you know, various kinds of patterns that they do. But for me, just like that was just really, it just felt good, you know, to be able to just sweep that energy off, you know. Now, of course, that didn't make it go away, make, you know, my problems go away. It was just a temporary fix, but it did clue me into something. It clued me into like, you know, I wonder what's going on with this, you know. So that was one thing. And smoke usually comes from a plant, and a plant usually has some kind of plant spirit, whether you, especially these power plants, either the ones that are in North America or the ones that are, you know, there's some found in Europe as well. So, you know, also crystals and stones were really, and still are, very important to me. And I started kind of putting them on my body and stuff like that, and holding them. And I had them on my person when I went to my job, you know, stuff like that. And I just found like being in outside in nature, or just forever, for any amount of time, like a minute, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, an hour, I just felt better. So I felt like, okay, this is interesting. You know, earth-based things really speak to me, you know? And so, and I'll get more into my background, you know, later, but some years went by, and I worked a lot with the sacred tobacco spirit, which I've mentioned before. And I found that working with a power plant spirit like that was, and it still is, very, it's really good to have a connection with a being that gives you some kind of stability and feedback about where you are and what, like how your healing is going, you know. And that's helpful to have in addition to dealing with actual human beings who can help you, you know, with that as well. Of course, later on, I started working with animal spirits as well, and I'll talk about that later. And various traditions that I was, you know, participating in and sometimes getting initiated into or having transmissions were in the Andean mysticism tradition, and also later on Nepali shamanism, at least taking classes in that, and receiving transmissions in that. And my point about bringing this up is what happened was, because I'm looking at a big picture for you right now, I'm kind of looking at like the sweeping big picture of the last almost, well, maybe about 18 years, 17 years, something like that. And I'd say that what all of those things did was lead me back to my own genetic ancestors. Not exclusively, but in addition to all these other beings from other lineages and countries and geographic places associated with different people. So I'm not saying that the goal is to rack up as many things as you can do. What I'm saying is that's just how it happened to me in terms of like needing to have one kind of exposure and being enveloped in the Andean mysticism world, and then that kind of led me into, I had a different set of problems that needed to be addressed, and that kind of led me into Nepali shamanism. And then during my training, you know, and all these things are ongoing, you know, I mean, I'm still learning about these different things, you know, but in the different trainings about Nepali shamanism, that one of the classes was where I had a very profound experience with a Nordic deity. Maybe I'll talk about that next time. So it was like I was in this one class with a traditional Jankri shaman, and he's, you know, taking us through this actual visceral experience in shamanic trance states, right? And in my private notes, I was like, I actually physically felt this Nordic deity. And ever since then, I knew that that was when I was going to connect with that deity for a long time. And then later, I found out that, you know, sure enough, I had some ancestors in real life, you know, way back when, because we have the added advantage now of having technologies that can figure out our, you know, DNA and stuff like that, like how far back it goes, you know, which countries, etc. But I found out that there was some Scandinavian ancestry, which I never knew about. You know, most people in my family didn't know about that. So it was only after, you know, like I said, many of these years went by, and other healing experiences from other cultures outside of my own biological epigenetic memory, shall we say, that I could reconnect in a safe and healthy way with my own healed ancestors. Now, what I'm leaving out here is I also, at the same time, my sister was able to take many ancestral healing classes that I benefited from because I'm related to her. And so she was able to heal some of the lineages in our actually most of them. If not, I think actually she might have healed all of them. Um, but we just had a death in the family, so you know it's kind of like ongoing. You know what I mean? Um, so so I do benefit from that, obviously. But I also think even if that hadn't happened, I still think I would have had a lot of healing done through working with these other traditions and then figuring out what works for me to help heal me. And then what I realized was most of this was done with a combination of nature, nature spirits, especially, you know, spirits working with and through other human beings, you know, through healings, not just with my teachers or with, you know, maybe other practitioners, but, you know, sometimes you get a healing from, it doesn't happen very often, but occasionally you'll get somebody who is like a walk-in, like where they'll kind of be a surrogate for some deity or something like that. It's kind of rare, but it happens. And then also my own work with nature spirits. And that's why I always talk about sacred tobacco. I always talk about animal spirits and plant spirits and stone spirits because I feel like these are the essence of these beings that have really helped me figure out not just who I am, but like how to solve some problems or at least begin to solve them. You know, when you feel like you have a network of support beings, and believe me, I have plenty of problems, you know, that are not solved, and they're not exactly tiny ones. Some of them are rather large problems. But boy, do I feel a lot better than I did 17, 18 years ago. And I'll give you a case in point, and then I'll wrap this up. In 2009, which was about, what, 16 years ago, I had a major death in the family. Last year, 15 years ago, I had another major death in the family. Both people, I had completely different relationships with both of these people. However, what they both had in common was they were both parental figures to me and very extremely influential, you know, both of them. And to compare and contrast my experience dealing with the grief from 16 years ago versus now, if we want to say before and after having all of this kind of field work with either trance states or shamanic healing or plant spirits, or you know, just using these different techniques in a respectful way, of course. I'll tell you flat out, I was drinking a lot back then. I was smoking a lot back then. I was extremely overweight back then. Now, a lot has happened since then with my health, where I've been I've worked very hard, but I've also had a very good medical care where I've lost some weight. Still have to deal with weight problems, but which I'm actually currently working on again. Nowhere near as bad as 15, 16 years ago. I mean, I wasn't an alcoholic, but I definitely, after the death happened 16 years ago, I started drinking a lot for, you know, for a short period of time. But I was smoking a ton. My blood pressure was out of the, just crazy off the charts. I was overweight and I was really unhappy. And now, you know, I'm 100 pounds lighter. I still have weight problems, but I'm, you know, obviously I had extremely good medical care, and I've worked my butt off to get to that too. So it's, you know, it's a combination, and that's how it is with these trance states too, with working with trance states or working with, you know, your own shamanic healing. You want to be around people who know how to safely guide you through it. And but I did want to like demonstrate that, you know, I'm going through another grieving process, you know, that just happened last year. But like in comparison, sure, I've had some things come up in the last year that are kind of uncomfortable, like maybe revisiting some old emotional wounds that I thought I was done with. But it's nowhere near as horrible as it was 16 years ago. I mean, I'm not talking about the grieving process. Grieving process is always difficult. I'm talking about the way I respond to it. Like, I was way worse 15 years ago. And I really chalk that up not just to, I chalk it up to a lot of things. I chalk it up to the last 15 years of my life, and for the rest of my life, I will be committed and am committed to my physical, mental, emotional, spiritual well being, my shamanic well being throughout all space and time, you know, and dimensions. But I think what's different now also is that I've worked enough with different kinds of consciousnesses and continue to learn so much. And I haven't even mentioned runes to you yet, because that enters into Nordic, Scandinavian animism and stuff like that. But really trying to get into not blindly just willy-nilly going into whatever and just saying, bring whatever energy to me, you know. That's not how you do it. You go in with a very specific purpose, and hopefully with a, if you don't have a human teacher, then at least have some kind of instruction on how to safely do this for yourself in a very, you know, which is what I try to do for other people. And I work with my sister as well. We have a Patreon, so, and we try to guide people through this process. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't really tell you a whole lot about some of the horrible things that happened to me when I was a child or a teenager, or in my 20s or 30s or even 40s. Well, probably my late 30s, really, because by the time I was 40, 41, I got my first massive, you know, traditional healing. Before that, I was getting, you know, other healings that were also traditional, and they were very effective. In fact, I shouldn't say that, because I was getting traditional healing before that. I was getting traditional healing from people probably by the time I was 30. But I think that what needs to be told, there's so many different aspects of like traditional healing that you may get, or people who, I don't want to act like traditional healing is the only way to go. There's a lot of people like myself who have been taught various traditions, but in the ways that they transmit their healing or knowledge or wisdom or whatever, it's kind of done in a more kind of broad-based, cross-cultural way, which is what I try to do, because I think there's a lot of, I don't like getting wrapped up in one area too much in terms of traditions, because sometimes what I've learned is, as great as some traditions are, they don't answer all of our problems, which if they did, no one would go to something else, you know. You do need to kind of stick with something, obviously. You don't just like want to dabble in everything, and that's not what I do. Because if I was dabbling, I would just do something and then forget about it and not continue it. What I do is I learn what I need to learn, keep that going, learn something else, keep that going, you know. So it's a lot of like kind of multi-layer kind of things, because the big elephant in the room, which I mentioned this in the last video, and I'll get back more to in the next video about shamanic concepts, but I wanted to kind of talk more about my personal background in this chapter. But I think to get what we're missing, like the big elephant in the room, as the expression goes, the thing that nobody wants to talk about, except for, you know, a few people here and there, is that we're missing elders. And I mentioned this in the last video, or the video before that. We're missing elders, human elders, especially in the concept of traditional wisdom. And why are we missing elders? Well, because I'm not saying we don't have elders. We do. Maybe we have elders that do other things, but they don't function in the same way that an elder in a traditional culture like in Nepal or India or China, or even some Eastern European countries that still have intact traditions. Obviously not anywhere near any of the intact traditions in South America or North America or Africa or any of those places. And we have a lot of unspoken pain that we, meaning Eurocentric people, especially Eurocentric people, I think, who've had to immigrate to other countries, whether it's North America or Australia or wherever, or other continents. I think people don't realize how much epigenetic loss and just pain there is because the traditions are broken. If you're lucky enough to still have them with you, then consider yourself one of the lucky ones, because most people don't. And I think when people are, I'll just take the United States of America. When people in America who are of Euro descent immigrate, they immigrated over to this country, and whenever it was, might have been as early as the 1700s, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, or even currently, well, more likely, Ellis Island era. And before that, you'll find traces of things that are still in the country, in this country, that are from the old country, but it's considered kind of like, maybe not so much anymore, but it used to be considered kind of like, I don't want to say laughable, but kind of something that people would make fun of, or certainly not take seriously. And to be fair, you're not living on the lands that your ancestors are on anymore, and we haven't for a minimum of 300 years. So there's a different kind of pain, I think, from people who are Eurocentric and living in America or another country like Australia or something like that, but they're not living on the same land that their original ancestors, and their original ancestors could be from like 10 different countries, but they're usually in Europe, for the most part. I mean, there's always, a mixture of people, but even just a little bit of that, you can, there's definitely a lot of mixed backgrounds, in this country. A lot of the Scots and Irish and Welsh and various European countries, came here and married Native American people. So there's a lot of people who are identifying as Native American people here who also have Eurocentric blood, and I don't want to get into, the only reason I'm bringing up like the whole blood part of it is not to get into like superiority and all this. That's not the point. The point is to reconnect the essence of, where, if you are a Eurocentric person, if your ancestors came from that area, even if it's like 10% or something, and you're feeling a lot of pain about that, there are ways to connect with them, but it can be tricky. And I think it's even tricky with people who have intact traditions. And so there's different ways to do that. I found a lot of success in connecting with sacred tobacco. That was just what worked for me. And thank God it still works for me. I use it for a lot, not just for my own personal healing. I work a lot now with sacred tobacco with the weather. And I do other things about, any kind of troublesome things going on in the world, either in my local area or in my, you know, general state. Um, so it's not always just about my health. It's also about my connection to the outside world, whether it's the trees outside my window, or it could be a town 1,000 miles from here. These are different ways of working with these non-human spirits that have been here for thousands and thousands of years. And sometimes you can do that by going to a sacred site too, with caution, because some sacred sites, like I was saying before about broken traditions, if they haven't been kept up, if they haven't been, which, you know, Eurocentric traditions, they haven't been kept up because they were banned for thousands of years. Let's just call it what it is. And when it wasn't the church, which, let's face it, the church did most of it, but when it wasn't the church, it was, you know, already so well steeped in society that it was dangerous, that industrialism kind of took over and kind of substituted it with kind of like a corporate kind of, you know, no, we don't do that, you know. So I'm not saying corporations are going out of their way to tell people what to do with their relationship with Mother Earth, but they kind of are a little bit. So I hope that this was kind of a little more of a personal look at kind of what has helped me, in hopes that it will maybe help you as well. There's a lot to unravel. And there still is, because I mean, like I said, I'm in the middle of grieving somebody right now. So, like, you know, I'm still going through some processes myself. But like I said, I'm so much better off than I was before I started working with these. I call them either trance states, if I was shamanic journeying, or plant, animal, stone spirits, you know, different kinds of levels of consciousness, beings. They tend to be things that are very hard to put a label on, and they're very hard to encapsulate. They're very, but when they show up and you achieve a desired result, even if it's one that happens over a period of time, it's very life affirming. It makes you feel like you're part of something that means so much. And you're very connected to the earth when you do this kind of work. And I think, especially in this time and space right now, you know, I hate to say it, but some people call this a, you know, post-capitalist, late-stage capitalism, dystopia. But I also see it as an opportunity for us to reconnect with these different helpful, always helpful beings. You know, you always want to try to engage with the helpful beings. Well, how do we do that? Well, this is where you need, you know, some care and guidance, and always make sure you seek out people that know about offerings, that know about protection, that know about purpose, like specific, you know, like if they start saying things like, you know, let's just see who shows up, then don't work with them, you know. But usually it's very specific work. So you may come to, like, for me, I came to this work, you know, because I was going through kind of a psychic thing that was uncomfortable, like really uncomfortable. And it was really affecting my life big time, and physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So it was kind of happening all at once. So I could have just as easily gotten healed and then just done something else. But I was so changed by what happened, and also interested in, like, the whys, and also, you know, this is kind of cool, maybe I could help other people with this, or maybe I could show people what happened that was like really cool about turning this kind of horrible situation into something that opened up a whole new world. I know that's a very overused expression, but it is. And actually, it's, to be more specific, it's whole new worlds. Because when you're looking at multi dimensions and these different beings that you work with, it is like being in different worlds. And, they always say, I don't know who coined the term, but the shaman works in two worlds at the same time. I'm not sure who originally said that, but it was somebody famous. And, that's true. And I think if you're a person who has psychic gifts or heavily heightened intuitive abilities, or you're an empath, or you're a highly sensitive person, there's a lot of people who have highly sensitive, you know, attributes that I think eventually you'll find that those connect to certain kinds of psychic abilities. Well, there's a lot of things you can do with that. They don't always have to be the ways you see on television or the ways you see in the movies. And so, anyway, I'm going to end it there for now and move on to a new chapter coming soon. Okay. Hi, if you liked this episode today, feel free to like and subscribe to my channel and check out the other episodes on YouTube at the Now Moment Journey podcast, and as well as any other videos I have there. I have quite a few. I'd also like to invite you to a free quiz, which will help you figure out what kind of animal or plant or stone spirit archetype you are. And that's actually more of like to get you prepared for working with your own animal spirits, plant spirits, stone spirits, to build your own spiritual sovereignty so you can have your own personal spirit relationships. And I'd like to just show you something here. You can go to my link tree, which is www.linktr.ee/now moment journey. And you'll see here where I have some podcast episodes. And then you'll see getting to know your animal, plant, and stone spirit families class. That's about four buttons down. Just click on that, and that will take you to a page where there's a class, but just page down for the free preview. And that will sign you up to get the free preview, which includes video and also a free quiz. So if that looks interesting to you, I highly recommend you do that. Also, if you're ready to join a community of like-minded, like-hearted souls with myself and Marissa Lovett, we have a Patreon, and that's also on my link tree here right beneath the animal, plant, and stone spirit families. And you can join that as a free member as well. If you'd like to join and support the podcast, and you get a ton of other bonuses. You get to participate in live streams, which include shamanic journeying and learning how to build relationships with plant, stone, and animal spirit families. We're also doing Nordic and Germanic ritual and ceremonial practices. I'll be talking more and teaching more about the runes. So that's also going to be included at the Patreon, and how you do that. And then also, just feel free to look at the other links on my link tree. I have links to other podcast episodes. And also, if you'd like to just sign up for my email list, that's down here, Shamanic Coach newsletter. And I'd also like to talk about our free Discord group, which is a discussion group for the animist practices for the Nordic animist year. So, like, let's say you're interested in Eurocentric practices, pre-Christian Eurocentric practices, ways for you to get in touch with the earth that's maybe through a Eurocentric pre-Christian vein. This is a really great group, and it's guided by some research by other authors, but it's a great group where a lot of us who have experience in Nordic animist ritual work, as well as following the runic calendar. And, even if you're new to this stuff, it's really fun. It's a lot of fun. So I encourage you to check that out as well. And yeah, so I hope you'll join me in any of those veins. Even just signing up for the email list is great. And the quiz is a really great method to let you kind of find out what your interests are. Let's say you gravitate more towards animals. What is it about animals that you gravitate towards? And it's more about the spirit, not just the specific animal. So these things have been with all of us, all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds for thousands of years. So I hope that you'll check that out. And in the meantime, wait for the next episode by liking and subscribing on YouTube, and you'll be sure to get the update. So hope to see you soon. Many blessings.